Good morning, everyone. It is day 3 of the Firestone Destination event out here in Eastern Oregon. If you caught the last couple of videos, you will kind of have an idea of where we're at right now. If you want to check out what we did yesterday, you can check out the link up here in the corner. Now today, it's feeling already like the mud is kind of drying out. As you can tell, some of our vehicles are completely covered. I think my truck weighs an extra like 200 pounds as of right now. The weather is definitely much colder than it was at the start of this trip. We have a little bit of sunlight coming through, but looks like a lot of cloud coverage. Hopefully that will kind of break through midday today and it will dry out even further. Now we've covered a lot of ground in the past 2 days, and today that means we have a little bit less to cover. So there's probably going to be a lot of extracurricular kind of like offshoot trails, but the main thing is going to be getting off of this little basin plateau that we're in. Last night I actually went for a little late night hike with Micah and Seth, and we went all the way up to these ridges that you can see here in the back, and the view was absolutely beautiful, kind of like dreamy looking because we had a supermoon last night, the closest the moon is ever to the earth, and it was like daylight out. Kind of crazy, really cool though. And now I'm going to focus on getting the truck down this kind of treacherous section of the hill that we came up yesterday. I'm going to try to do a better job of filming some of the obstacles and stuff that I have to put this truck through today, and hopefully I can capture it for you as we make our way through this wilderness.
All right, this is what we're working with here coming down this hill. It doesn't look that crazy, but it is pretty off camber, and then your tire just kind of falls in this hole over here. So just nice and slow, ease our way through it.
That probably didn't look as extreme as it felt, but it's a pretty big hole. guys, done with another day. And I know that one was pretty quick, but the roads that we drove, we covered so much ground the first 2 days that we honestly didn't have much going on today. So we explored some different things that I didn't film because it was kind of weird, so I'll explain a little bit. After we made it out of the camp spot this morning, there weren't really any major obstacles or anything really that crazy, so the truck and the Kimbo made it just fine through everything. And it wasn't long until we could kind of see back into a neighboring town, so we stopped at some pretty cool hot springs to have some lunch, and then after that we tried to find a camp spot, but everything in the area didn't seem too inviting, so we decided, hey, we're close to town, let's run in there, we can all fuel up, and then we can head back out to find another spot. So we went into town, we all fueled up. I made it to the gas station with 3 miles until completely empty, so thankful for the long range tank on this truck. We even went to a car wash and I sprayed my truck off for about 10 minutes and it is still completely caked in mud. I need to find some place with a really high pressure washer, that way I can get all of the mud off of it. You can see it on the window here. It's just caked everywhere, even on the camper. So from there, we headed back out into the wilderness area that we were at, and we came across this plot of land, and supposedly there are 2 pieces of land like this in Oregon. It's really hard to find anywhere, but we did call BLM and kind of ask them like, hey, what are the rules in this area? It's not like any other BLM land with dispersed camping or anything, but it is actually like open country. So you can just drive anywhere on trails or just off the side of the road and like up the side of a mountain. So it was pretty cool, but it felt weird kind of filming that stuff because it seems illegal, and I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression, but the area that we're in right now, we can just drive wherever. So we're just kind of parked like in the middle of some grassy knolls, and there's cattle absolutely everywhere. So it's pretty neat. This is where we hunkered down for the night, had some burgers as you guys saw, and it was a good kind of peaceful ending of the trip. Now I do want to have a little bit of a recap and kind of talk about my, not final impressions, but after a bunch of testing with the Kimbo on the Tundra, I want to talk about how everything did. So I've been kind of breaking this down into notes as I've been driving around, but first and foremost, the power. The Tundra obviously has way more power than the 3rd gen Tacoma, and because it's a bigger truck, it has tow haul and tow haul plus mode. Power in this thing is amazing on highways, on regular roads, and even off-road. There were a lot of scenarios where if I just needed more power, I would pop it into tow haul mode and the turbos would spool up quicker, and it just allowed the truck to kind of walk over anything that I wanted it to. I took this truck and the camper setup over a lot of things that I probably would not have attempted in the Tacoma. Maybe with a little bit of peer pressure I would have, but I definitely feel a lot more comfortable driving this thing around with it on the back of a 3rd gen Tundra. The second thing I guess would be the suspension. TRD suspension from Toyota all around. The only thing that's really increasing any load capacity is the Dobinson springs in the rear. Gives me about a 2-inch lift. Westcott spacer lift in the front. So a little bit up in the front, a lot of it up in the rear, and then with the weight of the camper, truck sits pretty level, and there wasn't a time throughout this trip where it felt lacking in any way. We covered so much different terrain, rocky, sandy, of course, muddy, so much freaking mud. Hill climbs, really sharp entry and departure angles on like creek crossings. We crossed river a few different times. The suspension felt really good, and yes, it would be nice to be able to have something adjustable like the Fox 2.5 DSC that I had on my Tacoma, but at the same time I didn't really have an option to, and I didn't really feel the need to. It's just kind of like the suspension is what it is, kind of relatively stock, just with some heavier springs in the rear to carry the weight, and felt really good. And then I guess the third thing would be the actual setup, how it fits on the truck. Obviously I have a little bit more space because the Kimbo Series 6, 6 foot long, fits on the back of a 6 foot bed Tacoma. This is a 6.5 foot bed truck, and it is a little bit wider too, so there is a little bit of room, wiggle room in between the wheel wells. And because of that, I noticed the camper shifting a tiny bit. It was never an issue. I've been checking the ratchet straps the entire trip,
I do know a pretty simple and easy solution to kind of center the camper and keep it locked in with just basically using some kind of like extra wood like I use for the base that it's sitting on right now. The base of course does make it a little bit taller, and I could probably lower it maybe an inch or two if I took off the Sherpa roof rack, but I think the benefits of having that up there and kind of deflecting the wind around it helps more, and there's more benefit to that being a pro than being like 2 inches, maybe an inch and a half taller as a con, if that makes sense. I'm not exactly sure where like the tipping point of this truck would be, but with the wider offset of the wheels and just a bigger, heavier truck overall, it felt pretty planted even through a lot of that off-camber stuff. And I guess at the end of the day, I'm just really happy with this setup. I'm glad it's working out. I think everything looks pretty dialed, and I guess the only takeaway of like things I would change would be adding fender flares. The Firestone Destination MT2s performed incredibly. That was the most mud I've ever driven through in my entire life, as you guys could tell from what the truck has looked like between yesterday and today. And traction was not an issue the entire trip, which was pretty incredible. With the offset of my wheels, I believe I have the Black Rhino Vols in a 0 offset on here, so there is a little bit of poke, and I was slinging mud all down the side of the truck and the camper. I actually had a casualty of one of the cameras on my driver's side mirror. Must have flicked up a chunk of mud with a rock in it, and it actually cracked the lens covering that camera. So camera's a little bit wonky. It still works, but you can tell there's a big like glass shatter in the images that it's projecting on the screen. So that could have been avoided with a lesser offset. However, I like this offset, so to keep the wheels and tires and everything that I'm running, I would probably add some fender flares and then just stabilize the camper so it can't shift around too much. I'm trying to remember if I had anything else written in my notes, but I think that was about it. So the plan for tomorrow is to start the journey back to Colorado. Again, I'm in Eastern Oregon. I'm going to cut across through Idaho, go down through the corner of Utah, and then across Wyoming down to Colorado. But there is a winter storm warning right now in Utah. They're projecting 8 to 12 inches or up to 22 inches in the higher elevation areas up in the Uintas, which I was planning on driving through, possibly camping in tomorrow. So not exactly sure where this is gonna go. Hopefully I can just get home and that's the end of it. But if I end up camping, it's going to be some crazy storm winter camping already. It's October 17th right now as I'm filming this, so we will cross that bridge when we get to it. If you guys want to see some like winter camping videos in the Kimbo, let me know in the comments down below. Love to hear your feedback on this whole trip and everything. And huge thank you to Firestone Tires for inviting me out to this event. It was an absolute blast, and I am more of a firm believer in these tires than I've ever been before, both the MTs and the XTs. The tires performed amazing through all different conditions and landscapes out here. I'm pretty hooked on them, and that's why I have them on all of my vehicles too. So if you guys have any questions on the tires or anything, let me know about that too in the comments down below. And I'm gonna head to bed because I gotta be up at about 6 a.m. tomorrow. If you're new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe. I make new videos every single week. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.